The evening was calm across the small ranch town. The kind of evening when the sun sank slowly behind the hills and painted the sky with soft orange light. Evan Hale, a hard-working rancher with dust on his boots and kindness in his eyes, was riding back home after checking his cattle. His horse moved at a steady pace, hooves tapping lightly against the dry ground. Evan wasn't expecting anything unusual that night. He was simply thinking about finishing his chores, eating supper, and resting after a long day. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the soft sound of the creek that ran near the trail. As he approached the narrow path beside the creek, something made him slow down. A shape was standing near the water, halfway covered by shadows. At first, Evan thought it might be another ranch worker, or maybe someone from the nearby town. But the figure didn't move like a person out for a walk. The figure stood stiff, almost scared. When Evan came closer, he saw it was a young woman. She held a small bundle wrapped tightly in an old cloth, clutching it to her chest like it meant everything to her. Evan's horse snorted softly, and the woman turned her head quickly. The look on her face was a mix of fear and exhaustion. Her eyes were wide, and her breathing was uneven, like she had been walking or running for a long time. Evan raised a hand to show he meant no harm. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you all right? Do you need help?" Before he could say anything else, she shook her head quickly and whispered, "Leave it. I'm begging you." Her voice trembled so much that the words almost broke apart. Her hands tightened around the bundle as if she thought Evan might snatch it from her. Evan frowned, confused. He wasn't anywhere near touching the bundle, and he hadn't even asked about it yet. He stayed still, trying not to frighten her. The woman looked tired enough to collapse, and even in the dim light, Evan could see that her hair was messy, and her dress was dusty from travel. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Evan wasn't the kind of man who rode past someone in need. Something about her made him stay, even if she didn't want him near her bundle. "I'm not here to take anything from you," Evan said softly. "I just want to make sure you're safe. It's almost dark. There are coyotes around these parts, and you don't look like you should be out here alone." But she didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to the bundle, and she held it even closer. It shook slightly in her hands, like something inside was moving. Evan's heart jumped for a second. Was it an animal? A scared pet? Or something else? He had seen many strange things on ranch land, but nothing like this. He didn't want to assume anything, but her fear was too strong to ignore. The sky grew darker, and a cool breeze swept across the creek. Evan noticed how her legs wobbled, and her shoulders sagged like she was about to fall. "You look like you haven't had food or water in a while," he said. "Please, let me help. You don't have to stay out here." For a moment, she looked like she wanted to run, but she could barely stand. She took a step backward, but her foot slipped on the wet grass near the creek. Evan moved quickly, but not to touch the bundle. He simply reached out to steady her. She stumbled, her strength giving out completely. The bundle slipped from her hands as she fell to her knees. Evan reacted without thinking. He caught the bundle to keep it from falling into the creek. He didn't open it, didn't shake it. He just held it carefully, like it might be fragile. The woman's eyes shot open in panic. She grabbed his sleeve, breathless and terrified, whispering, "Please, don't open it. Don't even look at it." Her fear was so real that Evan stayed absolutely still. He didn't loosen the cloth or try to see inside. He simply nodded. "I'm not opening it," he said calmly. "I promise." Her grip loosened slightly, but her body trembled, as if she had just escaped something terrible. Evan helped her sit up, noticing how light she felt. She was shaking from cold and weakness. Whatever she had been through, it had taken a toll on her. "You need help," Evan said again, his voice low but firm. "Please let me take you somewhere safe. My ranch is not far." She looked uncertain. She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Finally, her eyes softened. Maybe she realized she didn't have much choice. Maybe his calm, steady voice made her believe he truly meant no harm. "All right," she whispered, barely audible. Evan helped her onto his horse and kept the bundle in one arm, still being careful not to shift it too much. He didn't ask questions, even though his mind was full of them. Why was she alone? What was in the bundle? Why did she seem so afraid of anyone seeing it? The ride back to the ranch was slow because she leaned against him weakly, exhausted. Evan could feel how cold her hands were, even through her sleeves. He guided the horse gently, making sure she didn't fall. The ranch staff saw him approaching and hurried out, surprised to see a stranger with him. They whispered among themselves, but Evan didn't let them crowd her. "Get some warm water ready," he instructed. "And bring a blanket." The woman, who still hadn't given her name, was taken inside. Evan set the bundle down beside her carefully and stepped back so she could see he wasn't trying to take it. She opened her eyes briefly and whispered, "Thank you." Evan nodded. He didn't know her story yet, but he felt something unusual in the air. Something that told him this encounter was no simple accident. Whatever she was carrying, whatever she had run from, it was serious enough to leave her terrified and alone in the wilderness. And Evan, even without knowing why, felt a growing responsibility to protect her, even if danger was already close behind her. After the woman was carried inside Evan's ranch house, the warmth of the room surrounded her like a soft blanket after a long, cruel winter. She sat on a wooden chair near the fireplace, her hands trembling as she tried to hold the bundle close. The ranch hands stood at a distance, watching curiously, but they did not speak. They sensed something unusual about her, as if she carried a story too heavy for a stranger to ask about. Evan placed a mug of warm water on the table beside her and stepped back so she wouldn't feel threatened. She looked up at him with tired eyes, and for the first time since he found her, she seemed slightly calmer. She lifted the mug with shaking fingers and took slow sips. Warmth seemed to return to her cheeks little by little, though her eyes still darted toward the door and windows as if she expected someone to burst inside at any moment. No one spoke for several minutes. Only the crackling fire filled the room. Evan didn't rush her. He stood nearby, patient and calm, hoping she would feel safe enough to speak on her own. Finally, she whispered, "My name is Lena." Her voice was soft, and she held the bundle tighter while saying it, as if her identity and the bundle were tied together. Evan nodded kindly. "I'm Evan Hale," he replied. "You're safe here. Lena." Lena. Elaine 17. She looked unsure. Her gaze traveled slowly around the room, studying every corner, every shadow. Evan noticed how her shoulders tensed whenever a floorboard creaked, or whenever the wind pushed against the window. Something or someone had frightened her deeply. The ranch cook brought a small plate of bread and vegetables. Lena stared at the food like she hadn't seen a proper meal in days. Evan gave her a reassuring nod, and only then did she take a piece of bread. Her hands shook with hunger, but she ate slowly, carefully, as though she feared dropping the bundle would bring trouble. Evan noticed scratch marks on the cloth, long, thin lines that looked like they came from small claws or something rough. But there was no movement inside the bundle now. He didn't ask about it, though his curiosity grew by the second. After a few bites of food, Lena's breathing steadied. She rested the bundle on her lap and touched the cloth gently, almost lovingly. Evan saw the way she guarded it, like a mother protecting something precious. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded tired but clearer. "Thank you for helping me. I'm sorry for causing trouble." "8. You didn't cause trouble," Evan said. "Anyone would have helped if they saw the state you were in." She shook her head slightly. "Not everyone. Not anymore." Evan didn't understand what she meant, but he could tell she didn't want to explain yet. He tried a different approach. "Where were you headed before I found you?" Lena hesitated. Her eyes dropped to the bundle. She touched the cloth again. I didn't have a place. I was just looking for somewhere to hide. Hide from what? Evan asked softly. The silence grew heavy. Lena swallowed hard. For a moment, she seemed ready to tell him everything. But then a gust of wind outside made the window rattle. And she flinched. She pulled the bundle tighter against her chest. I can't say yet, she murmured. If I speak too soon, I might put you in danger. Evan frowned but didn't push. He leaned against the table, arms crossed loosely. Danger finds people when they're alone, Lena. Not when someone is helping them. You're safe here, no matter what's happening. Lena looked up at him, searching his face as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Something about Evan's calm presence seemed to ease her fear. He wasn't demanding answers. He wasn't judging her. He was simply offering warmth and shelter. Hours passed slowly as the night deepened. Evan stayed nearby while she rested her head against the back of the chair. She was too tired to lie down, but too afraid to sleep fully. Every few minutes her eyes opened, checking the bundle again. The scratches on the cloth bothered Evan. They could have been made by an animal, but he didn't want to assume the worst. Still, he had ranch animals and knew scratch marks when he saw them, but nothing inside the bundle made any noise. No movement, no breathing, no shifting. After some time, she caught him looking. She pulled the bundle closer to her chest. Please, she whispered. Don't ask about it. It's better if you don't know yet. I won't ask, Evan said. Not until you're ready. She nodded, grateful. For the first time, a faint softness appeared in her eyes, as if she finally believed he meant what he said. Later, when the ranch hands had gone to rest and the fire was burning low, Evan noticed Lena's head begin to drop forward. Exhaustion was taking over. He placed a folded blanket over her shoulders. She looked up sleepily, confused, but didn't resist. The warmth helped her relax. The guest room is ready, Evan said gently. You can sleep there. You'll be more comfortable. Lena shook her head immediately. No, I can't be far from you. If they come, I need someone close by. Evan's eyebrows lifted slightly. They? She froze, realizing she said too much. She pressed her lips together and whispered, Please. Not alone. No. Evan nodded without question. All right, you can rest here on the sofa. The fire will keep you warm. She looked relieved. She slowly stood up, holding the bundle tightly, and settled on the sofa. She placed the bundle beside her and wrapped her arms around it. Evan could see how much it meant to her, even though he still had no clue what was inside. He pulled a chair close, sitting where she could see him easily. I'll stay awake for a while, he said. You sleep. Her eyes softened. Why are you being so kind? She whispered. Because you needed help, Evan replied simply. Lena seemed to hold his answer in her heart like it was something rare. She closed her eyes and finally allowed herself to drift into sleep. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders relaxed, and the tension in her face faded. As she slept, Evan studied the bundle quietly. The cloth was old, worn thin in some places. The scratch marks were fresh, but the bundle was still now. He wondered what could have caused so much fear in such a gentle-looking woman. He wondered who she was running from, and why she believed danger would follow her. The night grew deep and quiet. Only the fire crackled softly. Evan remained awake, watching over Lena as she slept. Even though he knew almost nothing about her, he felt responsible for her safety. Something inside him told him this wasn't a simple situation. Lena carried a story that had weight, something that could change lives. Outside, the wind blew softly against the windows. Lena moved slightly in her sleep, holding the bundle closer. Evan stood up, placed another log in the fire, and returned to his chair. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The morning came slowly, with soft, golden light slipping through the curtains of the ranch house. Evan had fallen asleep in the chair near the fireplace some time before dawn. His neck ached from the awkward position, but the first thing he did when he opened his eyes was look toward the sofa. Lena was still there, curled up with the bundle held tightly against her chest. Her breathing was steady and peaceful. The first peaceful rest she'd likely had in days. The fire had burned to embers, and the room carried a pleasant warmth. Outside, the ranch workers were already beginning their daily chores. Evan could hear the clatter of buckets and the distant sound of cattle lowing. He stretched quietly, careful not to disturb Lena. As he stood up, he noticed something on the floor near the sofa. Small flakes of the cloth from her bundle. They had worn off during the night. When he bent down to pick one up, Lena shifted suddenly, her eyes snapping open in fear. Her hand shot out and grabbed the bundle tightly. For a heartbeat, she looked like she was ready to run again. Evan lifted his hands calmly. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're still safe here. Treenley. Treenley now. Treenley now for clam. Treenley now for case." It took her a few seconds to fully wake and realize where she was. Her breathing slowed. She relaxed back against the sofa, though she still looked embarrassed for reacting so quickly. "Sorry," she whispered. "Sometimes I wake up like that." "You've been through something difficult," Evan said. "Anyone would feel the same." She didn't answer, but she seemed grateful for his understanding. He brought her a warm bowl of porridge the cook had made. Lena accepted it slowly, still holding the bundle with one arm. Evan didn't try to take it. He didn't even look at it too closely, not wanting her to feel threatened. She ate quietly, her movements gentle and tired. After breakfast, Evan suggested she step outside to get some fresh air. Lena hesitated, glancing toward the windows as if checking for danger. But when she saw only sunlight and open ranch land, she nodded a little. She wrapped the bundle carefully in the old cloth, tying it tighter, and walked out with Evan. The ranch yard was wide and peaceful, filled with early morning light. Horses stood near the fence, brushing their noses together. The ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully when they saw Evan and Lena. She stayed close to Evan, her fingers tightening on the bundle every time someone looked in her direction. Evan guided her toward the corral. "No one here will harm you," he said gently. "You can relax a little." "I'm trying," she whispered. "But fear doesn't leave just because morning comes." He glanced at her. "Whoever you're running from, they're not here. Unklubling. 2-3. Unklubling." Lena looked down at the bundle. "They might come. They might follow." Evan felt a stir of protectiveness rising in him. "Let them try," he said with quiet confidence. "This ranch is safe. And you're not alone now." His tone surprised her enough that she lifted her eyes. Something in his expression made her look at him differently, as if she saw strength she hadn't noticed before. They walked further until they reached a quiet spot behind the barn. For several moments, she simply stood still, breathing deeply, letting the peaceful scene settle inside her. Finally, she began to speak in a low voice. "I've been moving from place to place for weeks," she said. "I haven't stayed anywhere longer than a few nights. When I saw you yesterday, I thought I should run, but I was too tired. I couldn't keep going. Well, I see, in the forest. Well, 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 well." "You don't have to run anymore," Evan replied. "Not here." Lena's eyes softened, but her grip tightened again. "I'm scared of trusting anyone. Every time I trusted someone, something went wrong." "What happened?" Evan asked, his voice gentle. She looked away. Her shoulders trembled slightly. "Someone wanted this," she said, glancing at the bundle. "And they were willing to take it by force. They said it belonged to them. They said I had no right to it." "But does it belong to you?" Evan asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it belonged to my father first. Evan didn't interrupt her. He simply waited. My father passed away months ago, she continued quietly. He gave this to me before he died. He said it must never fall into the wrong hands. I didn't know what he meant at the time. But after he was gone, people came looking for it. People who knew its value. Value? Evan repeated carefully. Yes, she whispered. But not the kind you can measure with money. My father said it carries something important. A truth. A message. I don't fully understand it yet. But they wanted it badly enough to chase me across towns. Evan's expression grew serious. Who are these people? Her lips tightened. I don't know their names. They always hid their faces. But they were organized. That much I know. Evan felt a storm forming inside him, not fear, but determination. You're safe now, he said. No one will touch you here. Lena finally looked at him fully. Why are you helping me? You don't even know what's inside this cloth. Lena, because you needed help, Evan answered simply. And because no one deserves to run alone. She stared at him for a long moment. There was a softness in her gaze now. A small spark of trust returning. They walked back to the ranch house, and Evan made sure the door was locked behind them. Lena sat again near the fireplace, clutching the bundle. Evan sat across from her. Do you want to tell me what's inside? He asked gently, not demanding, just offering her the chance. She shook her head slowly. Not yet. I'm still afraid. I promised my father I wouldn't reveal it until I found someone worthy of hearing the truth. Evan nodded. Then don't tell me yet. But know this, whatever it is, I won't betray your trust. For the first time, Lena smiled a small, tired smile, but real. Thank you. As the day went on, Evan went outside to work, but he kept checking the windows, making sure no strangers approached. Lena stayed inside, watching the sunlight move across the floor, listening to the sounds of ranch life. The peace of the place slowly seeped into her, easing her fear little by little. In the afternoon, she fell asleep again on the sofa, the bundle resting gently beside her. Evan found himself watching her from the doorway, noticing how different she looked when she wasn't afraid, gentle, calm, almost hopeful. When she woke, she looked around the room as if forgetting where she was for a moment. Then she saw Evan standing there and relaxed. Did you sleep well? He asked. She nodded. Better than I have in a long time. Evan smiled. Good. You deserve rest. She hesitated, then spoke again. Maybe, soon. Evan felt something warm settle in his chest. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Lena sat by the window with the bundle in her lap. She looked out at the peaceful ranch and whispered, almost to herself, I think I've finally found a safe place. But neither of them knew that the next night would bring the truth into the open and change everything. Night arrived quietly over the ranch, but it did not carry the same calmness as the night before. The air felt heavier, the wind stronger, and the sky darker, as if something unseen was drawing near. Evan sensed it the moment he stepped outside after supper. The horses in the corral were restless, stamping nervously. The dogs near the barn barked at the darkness for no clear reason. Even the cattle seemed uneasy. Inside the house, Lena sat near the fireplace with the bundle held tightly in her lap. She had been silent through dinner, speaking only when necessary. Her eyes kept drifting toward the windows, as if she felt the same change in the air that Evan did. Evan watched her closely. Every time the wind rattled the shutters or a branch scraped against the wall, she jumped slightly. You feel it too, don't you? Evan asked quietly. Lena swallowed hard. I don't know what it is, but something feels wrong. Evan nodded. Storm is coming. Thunder rolled far in the distance, soft at first, then stronger. The sky flashed briefly, casting a pale light through the windows. Lena tightened her grip on the bundle. Her breathing grew shallow. They might be out there, she whispered. Evan stepped beside her. If anyone is out there, I'll deal with it. You're safe here. But Lena shook her head. You don't know them. They don't stop. They don't fear anything. They want what I have. And they won't give up. The storm grew louder. Rain started hitting the roof in sharp, heavy drops. The ranch hands hurried to secure the animals, closing barn doors and covering supplies, while thunder cracked across the sky. Evan lit more lamps inside, trying to keep the house warm and bright. Stay here, he told Lena. I'm going to check the barn. Some animals don't like the storm. Don't take the bundle, Lena said quickly, fear rising in her voice. Please. It must stay with me. Evan nodded. I won't touch it. But when he turned to leave, a loud crash came from outside, something hitting the barn walls hard enough to make the ground tremble. Lena gasped. They're here, she whispered. It's probably just the storm, Evan reassured her, though a knot tightened in his stomach. I'll check. He grabbed his coat and stepped into the rain. Water poured from the dark sky in sheets, soaking him instantly. The wind pushed against him as he moved toward the barn. Lightning flashed, bright enough to show the entire yard in a single moment of silver light. The barn door thudded again, this time from the inside. The horses inside kicked and neighed loudly. Evan hurried forward and pushed the door open. The lantern inside swayed on its hook, casting wild shadows across the walls. The horses were frantic, pulling at their ropes, their eyes wide with fear. Easy, Evan whispered, trying to calm them. It's just the storm. But then he heard something small shifting near the ground. A faint sound, a movement that didn't belong to any animal inside. He followed the sound to a corner of the barn, where hay was piled. Something had fallen from the shelf above and rolled into a shadowed spot. The storm winds had pushed through cracks in the roof, knocking supplies around. Evan bent down and lifted the fallen object. The blanket he had left there earlier that day. But something else was under it, a small, heavy shape. It was Lena's bundle. Evan froze. She had left it on the sofa. He had seen it with his own eyes. How had it come here? For a second, he wondered if Lena had followed him without him noticing. But no, she would never leave the house in this storm. Not without saying a word. Evan lifted the bundle carefully. The cloth felt damp and cold from the rain that had leaked through the roof. As he lifted it, part of the old cloth slipped loose. His breath caught instantly. Inside, he saw a carved wooden object, smooth, old, and covered in carefully etched symbols. Beside it was a metal locket tied with a thin rope, its surface scratched but still shining faintly even in the dim light. The symbols on the carving were familiar, too familiar. Evan felt a shock run through him. His father had once told him stories of an old heirloom belonging to a close friend. A friend who had lost everything when the heirloom was stolen. Evan remembered sitting by the fire as a child, listening to his father speak of a wooden carving marked with ancient symbols. A carving that held the truth to a land dispute that had divided families long ago. It was never found. Many believed it destroyed. But it wasn't destroyed. It was here. The barn door slammed open behind him. Rain blew in violently. Evan turned quickly, tightening his grip on the bundle. For a moment, he feared someone had come to take it. But it was Lena. She stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, shivering violently. She was out of breath as if she had run the entire way. Her eyes landed on the bundle in Evan's arms, and horror filled her face. No, she whispered, stepping forward. You weren't supposed to see it. I begged you not to. Please don't open it. I didn't open it, Evan said quickly. The cloth slipped. I only saw the carving. But she looked on the edge of tears. You don't understand. I wasn't ready to tell you. I didn't know if you could be trusted. Rainwater dripped from her hair and clothes, but she didn't seem to notice. All her attention was on the bundle. Evan lowered his voice. Lena, this carving, it was my father's friend's heirloom, the one people talked about for years. The one that disappeared. Lena stared at him, stunned. You know about it? My father told me stories, Evan said. He said it was lost forever. Lena looked down, ashamed. It was taken from my father. He spent his whole life trying to get it back. When he finally did, he told me to protect it. He said powerful people still wanted it. People who would do anything to claim the land behind its meaning. End quote. Lightning flashed again, lighting up the barn. Thunder boomed overhead. Evan stepped closer, lowering the bundle into her hands. Lena, I believe you. I don't want the carving. I want you to be safe. She stared at him, speechless. No one had ever said those words to her since her father died. Her eyes softened, and her breathing steadied, though her hands still trembled. Suddenly, a loud thud sounded outside the barn. Not thunder footsteps. Heavy ones. Lena's eyes widened in fear. They found me. Evan grabbed her hand, steady and strong. We'll face this together. The storm roared outside, but inside the barn, something stronger formed trust. The footsteps outside the barn grew heavier, mixing with the roar of the storm. Rain hammered the roof, wind pushed against the walls, and thunder cracked close enough to shake the wooden beams. Lena held the bundle tightly against her chest, her eyes wide with fear. Evan moved in front of her, without a second thought, placing himself between her and the barn doors. For a moment, everything felt frozen, the storm, the fear, the breath between them. Another thud came, but this time closer, just outside the barn entrance. Evan leaned forward slightly, listening. The sound wasn't random. It wasn't a falling branch or an animal seeking shelter. It had purpose. It had weight. It had intent. Stay behind me, he whispered to Lena. I'm sorry, she whispered back, her voice trembling. I never wanted this trouble to reach you. Evan shook his head firmly. You're not the trouble. The people chasing you are. Lightning flashed again, lighting up the barn through cracks in the wood. The moment the light faded, the barn door rattled violently, as if someone had grabbed it with both hands. Evan's heart pounded, but he stayed calm. He had grown up on ranch land his whole life. He had dealt with cattle stampedes, wild animals, sudden storms, injured workers. Fear wasn't new to him, but the idea that someone wanted to harm Lena, that was different. It stirred something deeper inside him. Evan, Lena whispered. They won't stop. They want the carving. And they know I have it. Evan turned his head slightly. Do you trust me? She hesitated only for a heartbeat before nodding. Then we'll make sure they don't get anything tonight. The barn door shook again, harder this time. A voice outside shouted something, but the wind swallowed the words. Evan moved toward the door, placing his hands on the wooden plank that kept it shut. Who's there? He called out, his voice steady. No answer, only the sound of footsteps shifting in the mud. Then came a sharp knock. Not a request. A demand. Lena flinched. Evan felt her fear behind him like a shadow pressing in. He kept one hand on the plank and reached the other toward a nearby tool, a thick wooden handle used for lifting hay bales. If anything happened, he would protect her. He didn't know who stood outside, but he knew what he stood for. The storm thundered again. And right then, the footsteps outside began to fade. First slow, then quicker. Someone was retreating. Evan stayed still, listening until the steps disappeared under the sound of the storm. Only the wind remained, howling angrily around the barn. They're leaving, Lena whispered. Maybe, Evan said. Or maybe they're waiting. He wasn't going to take chances. He kept the plank firmly in place for several minutes, listening with every sense alert. When he was finally certain no one remained outside, he exhaled slowly and stepped back. Lena's shoulders dropped in relief, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade entirely. She looked close to collapsing from exhaustion. Evan placed a hand gently on her arm. "Let's go back inside the house. It's safer than the barn." She nodded weakly. Together, they stepped into the storm. Rain poured down in cold sheets, soaking both of them instantly. Evan kept one arm around her to shield her from the wind, guiding her carefully across the yard. When they reached the ranch house, he locked the door behind them and checked every window. Lena stood near the fireplace, dripping water onto the floor, clutching the bundle as if it were her heartbeat. Evan finally turned to her. "You should tell me everything now. Not because I want the carving, because I need to know how to protect you." Lena stared at the flames for a long moment before she sat down slowly on the sofa. The bundle rested on her lap, still wrapped tightly. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks, and her hands shook slightly as she untied the cloth. "Everything began years ago," she whispered. "My father owned land that many people wanted. There was an argument about boundaries, about which part belonged to him and which part belonged to others. But my father had proof. Something old, something his own father had passed down to him." She opened the cloth completely now, revealing the wooden carving and the metal locket. Evan stepped closer, but he didn't touch anything. The carving seemed even older in the warm firelight, the symbols carved into it deep and beautiful. "This carving," Lena continued, "shows the original boundary lines marked by our ancestors. Anyone who understands the symbols knows exactly where the land begins and ends, and the locket." She lifted it gently. Inside it are letters and documents proving everything. Evan nodded slowly. "Your father's friend. My father's friend. They must have known each other." "They did," Lena said softly. "They worked together. They protected each other's land. They trusted each other like brothers." "But how did the carving disappear?" Evan asked. Lena's eyes darkened with memory. "It was stolen by someone who wanted the land for themselves. They hid it for years. When my father finally found it and took it back, trouble returned with it. He knew someone would come after it again. So he gave it to me and told me to run until I found someone honest, someone I could trust to help protect the truth." Her eyes lifted slowly to Evan's. "And when I saw you on the trail, I didn't know if you were that person or not. I was scared. I didn't know who you were. But now?" Evan asked quietly. She wiped a tear from her cheek. "Now, I know you're the only person who stood between me and danger, without asking for anything in return." Evan felt a weight lift from his chest. "We'll protect this, and we'll prove the truth, together." Her eyes softened. "You're willing to help me? Even with the danger?" "Lena," Evan said gently, "danger came the moment you stepped onto my land. But I don't regret helping you for a second." The fire crackled softly as silence filled the room. But it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of understanding. The storm began to fade outside, its roar quieting little by little. Lena placed the carving and the locket back into the cloth, tying it carefully. Then she held it out to Evan. "I want you to keep it for now," she said quietly. "You're safer than me, and I trust you more than I trust myself right now." Evan took the bundle gently, his expression serious. She let out a breath she had been holding for weeks, maybe months. It was a breath of relief, of safety, of trust, finally finding a place to rest. Together, they sat by the fire, listening as the storm faded completely. Outside, the darkness slowly softened into calm. Inside, something new began, something built on honesty, shared danger, and a bond that neither of them expected. Lena looked at Evan with a small, grateful smile. "I don't know what happens next," she whispered. Evan nodded, We figure it out together. And for the first time since her father died, Lena truly believed she wasn't alone anymore.